All right, all right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, as usual. So, thank you all very much, as always, for listening. Anything you can do to interact with the product is always appreciated. So, wherever you are, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, anything and everything that your podcast platform of choice might use to feed the unholy eldritch monstrosity that is the various machine learning algorithms that we don't even really have control of anymore. And it will soon decide all of our fates. It's gonna get ugly. It's always gonna get worse before it gets better. But hey, that seems to be a universal constant, doesn't it? All right, not to start the show on too dour a note. There's going to be more of that, but try not to be too dour. On the agenda this evening, UFC 301 was last night. We'll go over that whole thing. Um, the good, the bad, the otherwise. The UFC is inflicting another Derek Lewis main event on us this coming Saturday. UFC on ESPN 56. They're in St. Louis, Missouri. And much as I don't like that main event, it's not a bad fight night card. It's, you know what it's missing? It's missing a good main event. That's kind of all that it's missing there, but we'll go over that. And then a little bit of news of the week. Not a whole lot. The UFC already, like, last week or whatever, actually, like at UFC 300, they did the announcement about, hey, Connor and Chandler are going to be headlining the 302 or 303. Let me check. I wish to check. Yeah, 303. Which is coming up fairly quickly. What was the other thing they announced? There was something else on. No, not anything else on 303, was it? That's actually. Yeesh, I'm getting a look at that card now. That is not a strong pay-per-view. Be honest about that, not a strong pay-per-view. Um, they are really phoning that in, hoping that Connor still has pull, which he might. To be abundantly clear, he very well might. That might do very, very well at the box office and not be good critically, but no, 304 we still don't know almost anything about, so I expect an announcement about that to come up sooner rather than later. Um, what's the again? What's the 30? Sorry, 303 is a little ways off. 302 is coming up fairly soon. Oh yeah, they announced 302. That was the other one with main, co-main, a few other fights for that, and that's actually 302. Slightly by contrast, that's pretty darn strong. Um, don't have the full bout order yet, but you got a good lightweight title fight main event. Anyway, they used UFC 300 fight week leading up to, and then the days immediately after to drop a bunch of fight announcements, which is fine. It has left news a little weak, for in the aftermath of that. So just be aware of that. There's a few things we're still waiting on. I mean, their big thing was like, hey, we got a teaser trailer sort of thing with Conor McGregor stalking back and forth while Foggy Dew plays. Uh, okay, fine. I mean, we already knew he was going to be on the. I don't know. Like that's the kind of thing you need to drop when you make the announcement, not throw it on a pay-per-view here and then, yeah, whatever. So that's what's on the agenda this evening. Don't mean to ramble too much here. All right, I suppose we should jump right into it, should we? Yes, let us. All right, I'm not going to start with the UFC event. Instead, I want to start with. I know there's no chance this gets back to the relevant parties, but I'm going to say it anyway. Nothing but my heartfelt condolences to the family of Francis Ngannou. He announced that his, 18-month-old son passed away suddenly. Um, what a terrible. I don't know any. I don't know any details other than that. So I don't know what may have caused it. Um, not to. I don't know that it matters. That's a really weird thing to say, but dealing with the loss of a child, especially one that young, I I don't know how much solace there is to be taken in the material realities of how one shuffles off this mortal coil. It's uh, it's just terrible. So for whatever my condolences are worth, for whatever, as a man who believes in the power of prayer, but for whatever my prayers are worth, they're with that family. Just a truly terrible thing. So told you there'd be other downer stuff. I didn't want to talk about anything else before I at least mentioned that because much as fighting can impact life and death, there's just moments adjacent to this, or anything really, when, reality and tragedy kind of hits you in the head. And that one did. So anything you can do to, reach out, express your condolences, or I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Normally, this is where they'd say, "Hey, there's probably a GoFundMe or something," but I don't think there is in this case. I don't. I mean, Francis Ngannou certainly doesn't really need the money at this point. I don't say that unkindly. Um, but again, whatever can be done on your end. So, the real lasting stuff that's so much more important than athletic competition, even if athletic competition is life altering. Okay. Dour note out of the way. It just kind of felt wrong to leave that hanging over me, and knowing I'm going to talk about it, and then trying to get through everything else first. Some stuff's more important. But let us try to move on then. UFC 301. Let's start at the top, per usual. So, a couple of things. We lost a fight, the fight between William Gomez and. Who was he supposed to fight? Jean Silva. That fell out. Gomez initially missed weight. I don't remember exactly by how much, but it wasn't a small amount. It wasn't like he weighed 147. He was a ways off. When he re-weighs it, so misses weight, is given the additional time to make weight. When he re-weighs in, he weighs 143. Um, I'm one of these people that does believe that if your body performs optimally, not right at the number for your weight class, then cool. Usually that's true if you're a slightly smaller guy fighting up. Um, so the point there is just like, could I see a few bantamweights competing at featherweight who, maybe hadn't bulked up a lot and just their walk around weight is kind of 143. Frankie Edgar would on occasion weigh, like 153, 154 because he ended his career at bantamweight for a reason. He walked around at, uh, you know, right around 155. He did not cut a lot of weight. But this was not that case. He overcut dramatically. I don't know if there was a scale issue. I don't know. I'm glad they called it. He looked awful when he weighed in. I mean, he looked genuinely awful. So thankfully they did not let that fight go forward. But we lost that one. On the whole, um, how did your boy do on picks? 11 and 2. 11 and 2. I'm pretty good with that. Um, one of the ones I got wrong, I probably shouldn't have taken the flyer that I did on Malarkey and Roofy, which is apparently how he prefers it pronounced. That's how they were pronouncing it on the broadcast, and John Anik takes that stuff seriously. So I think he does prefer Roofy instead of Hoofy. Um, might be more of a nickname. Sometimes that happens, especially with certain Latin traditions can have very complicated last names or identical last names, so you adopt a different, again, sort of surname for purposes. But apparently he prefers Roofy. Probably shouldn't have taken the flyer on Malarkey there. I should have trusted the odds makers a little bit more on that one. The only other one I got wrong was Vitor Petrino and Anthony Smith. And, well, a lot of us got that one wrong. Um, yeah, we'll talk about the fight in particular when we get to it. I'm not mad about getting that one wrong. Little annoyed. Again, the Malarkey and Roofy one, probably should have known better. But the underdogs had a very bad night when it came to UFC 301. There were a whopping 2 underdogs who cashed. One of them was Anthony Smith. The other was Jose Aldo. Other than that, it was favorites all the way down. Some of those, it turns out when you book a bunch of squash matches, that can be a relatively easy thing to figure out. Not that all of these were, horrible mismatches, but I feel like this card was deliberately. This was a more so than a lot. This was a very deliberate card in terms of matchmaking and, like, I'd say desired outcomes, but hard to say it another way. Yeah, that was that. So again, 11-2 for the event brings me to year to date 127-59 with 3 no contests. No draws yet in the UFC this year. So I'm back at 2-1. All I want to do is be better than 50-50, but if I could, at different times this year, I've been almost 3-1. Almost. A couple of really good cards in close succession that pushed me up a little bit higher, and then I had some that were very close to 50-50 that kind of brought me back down to earth. So again, that's where I stand year to date. For people who keep being track of that stuff, I mean, I am. But if you care at all, that's where we are. All right, as for the fights in particular, main event. Alexandre Pantoja defeats Steve Erceg, retains the title 49-46 by one scorecard. This is via unanimous decision. Don't agree with that. And then 2 48-47, which I think is fine. That's perfectly fair. Honestly, 48-47 to Erceg is not out of the question here. You could have given Erceg 2, 3, and 4. So I scored it 48-47 for Pantoja, doing it live. 2 things about my live scoring I want to address very, very briefly. I gave Pantoja the second, and I think that was wrong. I think I just got that wrong. All 3 judges gave Pantoja the third, which I feel weird about. Because I gave Erceg the third. I saw the third round is close enough that I'm not up in arms here, okay? It's a close enough round. You could argue either way. And not up in arms. 4 goes to Erceg. Most people have it 2-2. In fact, 2 of the judges have it 2-2 going into the 5th. And the 5th is kind of going Erceg's way. Not definitively, but a little bit of his direction. Then he gets 1 takedown. Pantoja pretty quickly is able to escape to his feet. Used a little bit of a groin kick to do so, but went unremarked by all parties. The second time Erceg hits a double leg, he gets swept, and Pantoja's on top, and this time Erceg can't get out. He tries octopus guard, he tries a few other things, and this time he can't get out. Pantoja spends the last chunk of that round on top doing some work. Nothing fight ending, But he was not just laying there like, I got the takedown, I got the round. He was doing stuff. He was looking to pass. He might have passed in that final sequence. I forget. Um, enough to win the fifth round, and enough, which wound up being enough to win the fight, retain the title. Urseg got real close to this one. I told you guys last week, like if I was feeling froggy, I might have gone with Urseg. You could see why here. He was real close to winning this fight. Had he not shot for that double leg, if that fifth round goes the rest of that last bit without Pantoja on top, I do not think that fifth round goes to Pantoja. I'm not saying, again, Urseg was not running away with the round before that, but it was his round. I think he was winning it to that point. And he lost definitively enough the last bit of the round to lose the whole round, and then ultimately after that, and that ultimately again cost him the fight. There was some really good stuff throughout the course of this fight, though. Urseg's boxing is very smooth, and I loved the fact that he started throwing elbows. He cut Pantoja twice. Um, Again, intercepted him when Pantoja would crash in a blitz, just fold over the elbow. Really nice adaptation. I hesitate to call it brilliant, but given how infrequently people do it and how obvious it is, um, Sandhagen is another guy who will do this. Just okay, I can't hurt you with my punches. Let me throw something bony in front of you and see what I can do there. Because when he fought us like Song Yadong, he could hit Song Yadong almost all day, but he couldn't back him up. He couldn't do anything to him. So as Song kept kind of crashing in on him, he just, fine, I'll go to elbows, and he cut him open bad enough to stop the fight. I mean, he was still winning that fight anyway, if you recall the fight in question. But yeah, so Urseg doing that a little bit, really good. Here's the couple of things about Pantoja. One, that man's chin. I don't know what it's made of, but I'm not quite going to say it's on the level of Max Holloway, because Max Holloway has fought guys who bomb, and due respect to the people that Pantoja's fought, none of them hit as hard as the guys that Max Holloway's fought. I mean, Max Holloway's been dropped officially no times, unofficially once. And it took Justin Gaethje hitting him to drop him. And he still got right back up. Like, legitimate drop, but fairly quick recovery. Max's chin is otherworldly. So, not going to say Pantoja on the same level, because not fighting the same velocity and mass is not being thrown at him. But he's hard to hurt, man. He's very hard to hurt. He's undeterred in a lot of respects. He was eating some serious shots and just kept on trucking. Would ate a couple of really nasty elbows and just pushed forward, got a clinch, would get a takedown. Had a great first round. His top game is ruthless. That man is a great passer. Urseg hit a couple of nice sweeps by being patient. Daniel Cormier incorrectly identified a few of them as just big explosive movements. No. They look that way because of the technique being employed. But if you're like almost giggler sweeping Pantoja, that's technique, not muscle. I mean, the giggler is a technique that is a sweep that relies on timing anyway. If you've never seen it, feel free to look it up. They call it the giggler because when you hit it, it's so easy. You stop after you've hit it and kind of like giggle at how easy it was. It's all about timing and leverage, sweeping from you're on bottom and half guard. Again, it's just about where their weight is, where it's moving. Good sweep to know. But he also hit a couple of like octopus guard plays. Urseg was he was very well prepared for what Pantoja brings. Give him and his team all the credit in the world for that. He was ready. He was very ready on a lot of fronts. And then just made a very poor decision in a very clutch moment at the end of the fight, and it cost him, man. It cost him big. He could have won the he could have won this fight. He could have won this fight. Um, but a lot of guys could have won title fights and didn't, and that's not to be overly blunt. That is what separates champions from challengers. Now, Usyk's young enough that I don't know that this hurts him a whole lot, but before I move on to another point here, let me just finish with Pantoja. Pantoja's physically strong. He's got a little bit. There's a few guys, like Dricus du Plessis and a few others, who have a weird like physical affect that they will swear up and down they're not tired, but a lot of what they're doing physically resembles someone who is fatigued. Now, I don't think it's too disputable that Pantoja slowed down the stretch in this fight. But if you were to just look at his body language and whatnot, and you would think like that guy's dead on his feet, and then no, he's certainly been in a fight, but he's not. He's never quite as fatigued as he looks, and some of that is style, some of that is, and I'm sure some of it's BS too. Like, no, no, I'm not tired. You're tired. You're a little tired. Um, I'm sure again, people who work very, very hard on their cardio, so I'm throwing shade there. It's just another note. But Pantoja's physical presence, his chin, um, and just his will to continue, that's a hard guy to beat, man. He does a lot of stuff very, very, very right. And he is not afraid of warfare. He's not dude. His title winning effort was an all-time war. I don't know where exactly on the all-time wars, but certainly for flyweight, an all-time war. Uh, he'll just get through really tough spots with determination, his chin, and a very, very good skill set. So, but needs to be so. A few people kind of got down on Pantoja after this, like, boy, he almost lost to the 10th ranked guy in the division. His title reign's about to end, and then I think it was Jack Slack. I saw a note that the top five right now at flyweight. If you look at the contenders 1 through 5, their record against Pantoja combined is 0-7. I mean, that's telling. One, Urseg he was always better than I think a lot of people were giving him credit for. But this was, I hate to say it, this was rushed. Like, he went from fighting, it was Matt Schnell his last time out, to Alexandre Pantoja. That is a massive jump in competition. And I know you don't say no to title shots because they don't come around very often, but I heard Luke Thomas ask a question related to this on it might have been his live chat, or I forget where I saw it. But he asked an interesting question about this, about the future of Steve Urseg. And especially, again, the poor decision that he made with respect to the end of this fight. Again, just poor judgment. How many people, if you look at like the UFC roster, the vast majority of people on the UFC roster will never fight for a belt. And if you want to remove the like And first of all, remove the BMF because that's a gimmick. If you want to remove like interim belts from the equation and just go undisputed titles, that number gets even smaller. The vast majority of the 600 some odd people on the roster, I think it's a little less than six, will never fight for a belt. You talk to all of them, they'll swear they're coming for the title, and I appreciate that fighters have to delude themselves into that. And that's not, I don't mean that as an insult. Like, you have to have a textbook, definitionally delusional level of support, of belief in yourself to do that. To do that at all, much less do it at that level, right? So, but the vast majority will never fight for a belt. How many people fight for a belt, and if you lose your first shot at a UFC title, ever get a second crack at it? And it was an interesting enough question because, if we're talking about the future of Usyk, and because it seems silly to discount a guy who's 26, 28, yeah, 28, and just gave the flyweight champion of the world a very, very tough fight. It seems foolish to say he'll never fight for the belt again. But it is an interesting question. Like, how many guys never get, if you lose that first title shot, how many people never get another one? So, off the top of my head here, I'm going to kind of go, I'm going to exclude the women's rosters at the moment, not because not because they don't count, but women's MMA has not been around quite as long as men's MMA, and I think earlier days skew the pool here, and skew the data. So I'm going to set them aside for just a second here. If we start at men's flyweight, how many people lost a title fight and then got a second one? It's not none. So Demetrius Johnson wins the. So Joseph Benavidez, Demetrius Johnson for the vacant belt. Benavidez would get a rematch with DJ a little bit later, lose. Then he would actually get two more shots at the belt, technically, after it was vacated. He fought Davison Figueiredo twice for it, and then, well, because once Davison Figueiredo missed weight, beat him. Then they remade the fight. Figueiredo made weight and beat him again. Neither of those fights went well for Joseph Benavidez. At all. But look at the gap between Demetrius Johnson knocking him out and his next shot at the belt. It's years. It's a number of years. Who else? Johnson fought John Dodson twice. Cejudo twice. But that was kind of it for Demetrius. Cejudo didn't defend the flyweight belt in any meaningful capacity. We already mentioned Benavidez. I'm going to exclude Moreno from this because he did not lose his first shot at the belt. He and Figueiredo fought to a draw. And a draw is not a loss. You don't win the belt, but it's not a loss, and it can sometimes force things. Yeah, it's not impossible, but it's a little rarer if we move up to bantamweight. Bantamweight's such a weird division. Again, because it came in and Faber got a dozen title shots, which was to carry over from his WEC favoritism. Bantamweight's again just kind of a mess. But it's still kind of rare. Featherweight. As Aldo comes over as champion. Frankie, no, this wasn't Frankie Edgar's first shot at gold, because Frankie had been the lightweight champion. The Korean Zombie loses to Aldo and then 8 years later fights Volkanovski for it. I think it was literally. It might have been actually. Jeez. Closer to 8 than I'm gonna look up. Who else? Florian was technically his second shot at gold after losing to BJ Penn, but he had to change weight classes to do it, which other people have done. But that's a pretty drastic step, mind you, to change weight classes like that. So Florian technically, um, Aldo didn't have a lot of rematches. Again, he fought Edgar twice, but he fought Max twice, but Max beat him. Um, and Frankie fought Max again, but again, Frankie doesn't count because was a champion. And Frankie was successful in his first shot at UFC Gold if we go back to his lightweight title win. Um, yeah, Volk didn't really rematch anybody. Let's see what Topuria does. Yeah, I just don't think it happened a lot at featherweight. Lightweight's got a weird history. So BJ Penn technically loses his first shot at gold. He loses to Jens Pulver. Then fights to a draw with Kyle Uno. Then goes up to welterweight and beats Matt Hughes. Weirdest career. So BJ Penn technically. Who else at lightweight loses their? Sean Shirk would technically be one of these guys. Lost a welterweight title fight, came down to lightweight and became champion. But again, switching weight classes kind of muddies the waters a little bit. And he didn't hold it very long and then got stripped of it. And then got battered by BJ Penn when they did fight. But if you look at BJ Penn's reign, like Joe Stevenson never got another crack at gold. Diego Sanchez never got another crack at gold. Kenny Florian had to change weight classes. We already talked about him a little bit. Who's the other? Oh, crap. I swear there's one more guy that BJ Penn beat. I might be thinking of Sean Shirk and just had... Yeah, because BJ was champion for that. Right, I think that is the other one I'm thinking of. Welterweight... Welterweight actually bears this out. Not exclusively, but... Like, the big notable exception to this one is GSP, right? Because he loses his first shot at gold. Comes in, wins a couple of fights, fights Matt Hughes, loses. Took him a while to rebuild. Like, he did not... That was not a quick, immediate bounce back for him. He won, like, 3 fights before getting his next title shot, and then lost it very quickly, then regained it and went on to his reign, right? But because Matt Hughes did Frank Trigg, but that's another one that, like, the state of the division and the state of the sport was a little bit shallower all the way around, so rematches were kind of a bit more normal. If you look at George's reign, he didn't fight a lot of rematches. So who'd he beat that got another shot at gold? Condit. Condit wound up getting a second shot. Hendricks. George vacating the belt the way he did muddied those waters just a little bit, but Johnny Hendricks would technically fall into this category. So would Robbie Lawler, because Lawler fought Hendricks for the vacant belt, lost, won a fight, rematched. It was Hendricks' first fight back, and then Robbie beat him. Disputedly, that was a close fight. You could have scored that for Hendricks. I'm plenty happy Lawler won. But George, because Alves wasn't a rematch. BJ Penn was a rematch for George, but not a rematch for, like, that was not BJ, like, having lost a title, his first title opportunity. That was Penn going for, like, double champ status. Yeah, just the I don't want to spend forever and a day going over this. Because middleweight, Anderson didn't have, he had some rematches. Dan Henderson's a weird addition to this category, now that I think about it. Because he came over as the double champion from Pride, middleweight and light heavyweight. Lost both the unification bouts with Quentin Jackson and then Anderson Silva. And then, like a decade later, got an undeserved title shot against Bisping after Bisping became champion unexpectedly, and the world's worst detour in UFC title history. Bisping winning, great moment. What he did with the belt, utterly forgettable. Apart from George, like becoming a two-weight world champion by choking him out and then immediately vacating. But that detour with Bisping winning, ignoring every deserving contender in favor of a vanity rematch with Dan Henderson, who was like 50, and then losing to George St. Pierre, still avoiding like every legitimate. Dude, when he first won that belt, Jacare was there, Yoel Romero was there, Robert Whittaker was there, and he avoided all of that. Just nope, do not want. Do not want, do not want, do not want, do not want. I think so there's that, but so Henderson's a weird addition to that category. Then Weidman's run. Vitor Belfort's weird because some of his stuff was at light heavyweight. Did he even lose his first title fight? Wasn't his first title fight a loss to Couture? But again, that was like almost Dark Ages UFC stuff. Because I want to say like he lost to Couture and then then they rematched, and that's when he got the weird cut stoppage win. And then Couture beat the crap out of him in the third fight. I might be misremembering, and that might have just been fluke, cut stoppage, and then Couture beat the crap out of him to regain the belt. But, and again, I should stop this. I don't want to go over this forever. But I think it's a valid question, a valid thing to point out that for a lot of guys, you're never going to get to the belt. And if you do, if you lose that first title shot, I think statistically speaking, you're unlikely to get another one. Not impossible, but the majority of people who lose their first UFC title shot do not get a second one. So that said, I do kind of think Erceg probably will get another shot, but I don't know exactly when. Again, he's only 28, so he's got some time to still rebuild. And I do think that I'm not here to be a doom and gloomer about Pantoja. Not at all. I respect the heck out of him. But he's 34. And that 35 line is coming. And when it does, we know how that goes, historically at least. But this was a good fight. There was no fight of the night bonus. I think that did this fight a little bit dirty. This was a plenty good fight. All right, I rambled there for a bit too long. All right, co-main event. Jose Aldo defeats Jonathan Martinez via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Jose Aldo rules. All right, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I finally got one of my brothers to go back and like watch his career because I was very high on him coming into this fight. I picked him to win, obviously, but like listening to me talk about Jose Aldo, if you only saw like the tail end of his career, people go back, watch his stuff in WEC, watch his stuff in the UFC. Jose Aldo is an all-time great fighter that this sport has ever produced. He came out of like a 2-year retirement. Bear in mind, a fight that he did better against Merab Dvalishvili than pretty much anyone else. Dvalishvili won that fight because Aldo wound up not pulling the trigger often enough. But it's not like Merab had overwhelming offense. He just had enough forward pressure and control. But I don't think he ever even got Aldo down in that fight. Just, again, remarkable. Jose Aldo, what a guy. What a man. Come out of, again, couple of years retired. steps back into the cage, takes on a guy on a 6-fight winning streak that a lot of people, myself included, are very high on in general, Jonathan Martinez. Still think he has a very bright future, by the way. Talk about that in a second. And to 30-27 him, to look as good as he did. I mean, Aldo lost to Marab, but that was not a blowout. He was not beaten down. Like, look at everyone that Aldo kind of came up with. The guys he was sort of contemporarily fighting. Look at what they're all doing now. They're all retired, some of them for a long time. Or they took some serious beatings. Like, the last time Jose Aldo took a bad beating, like the last round and a half against Piotr Jan, and other than that, we have to go back to the Max Holloway fights. Like, think about that for just a second. This guy is, this man is 30, what, 36? 37. He's 37 years old at bantamweight, maybe the best division in the whole sport. Comes off a 2-year MMA hiatus. I know he had a boxing bout in between there, but 2 years off. Comes in against a young, talented, rising guy in the division and does not look like he's really missed a beat. I don't mean to say that this is the best version of Jose Aldo. He's not prime. I was there for prime Jose Aldo. It was special. This is not prime Jose Aldo. But, dude, he's still great. Really loved his use of front kicks to neutral. This was one of the big reasons I picked Jose Aldo to win this fight. Jonathan Martinez is a devastating kicking game, but I wasn't quite sure what he had if that didn't work. Because Jose Aldo, in addition to being a devastating kicker himself, is exceptional at shutting down people kicking him. We saw that here. He stopped Martinez's kicking game. There were some people who were like, man, Martinez didn't show up. Look, he barely threw any kicks. That's what happens when your kicks get checked. You stop throwing them. He just, once he got a read on Martinez it was near the end of the first. Last 90 seconds or so of that round, you can see he's kind of like, okay, you're not kicking as much. I've kind of got a read on your kicks and your feints, so I can check or evade most of them, and then you stop throwing them. And I got a read on your hands. He was able to fake wonderfully. Aldo has a great jab. Fighting open stance is not the biggest deal in the world. It still showed up here occasionally. But it was a lot of feinting it to set up his body attacks. He was tearing the body up. Landing plenty of his own kicks. This was... Jose Aldo's remarkable. He's just remarkable. To do what he did under all those considerations, my hat's off to him, man. He was a little bit non-committal about retiring after he won. I don't know what exactly is next for him. He might retire, and he might. This was the last fight on his contract, so he might leave the UFC and pursue something else. Which, look, man, I wish nothing but the best for Jose Aldo. I mean that sincerely, nothing. That man turned in not only one of the best title runs you'll ever see, if we count, and you should in some respects, if you count from the time he won the WEC belt to the time he finally lost the UFC belt to Conor, that's one of the best title runs you will ever see anywhere. I mean that. During that, he turned in not only spectacular performances, of which he had more than a few, he turned in a couple of my favorite featherweight title fight of all time. If we're just talking like not only skill but action, his second fight with Chad Mendes. Managed to be another guy who lost his first shot at gold. Took him a while to rebuild, though. But after he lost the second one, he never got back there. But watch that second fight with Aldo and Mendez. That is, no joke, one of the best fights you will ever see. It is, again, it's just a magnificent fight. And then to rebuild after the loss to Conor, to reclaim the belt. I mean, dude, his first fight with Frankie Edgar is actually a really good fight. Their second fight, Aldo just has his number from start to finish. The Max fights are not bad. Then he goes down to bantamweight and again kind of reinvents himself down there. Man, there was a period of time when Aldo, he could have been a three-weight world champion. You're going to think I'm crazy about this, but hear me out. There was a period of time when Jose Aldo was featherweight champion, Dominic Cruz was bantamweight champion, and Frankie Edgar was lightweight champion. I have nothing but respect for Frankie Edgar, and my respect and admiration for the game of Dominic Cruz is pretty well documented at this point. But at that point in time, you put Aldo in there against both of those guys, Aldo beats them. He could have been lightweight, featherweight, and bantamweight world champion. That was a possibility. Now, obviously, at the time, the UFC didn't quite go that route. They didn't like champions fighting in other weight classes all that much. Kind of but he could have, for that period of time, he could have done that. I don't know. I would have favored him to beat Pettis. I don't know that I would have favored him to beat Benson Henderson though. That's just a matchup thing, not a. Sadly, Bendo's also like criminally forgotten as a really great fighter. So Bendo at lightweight might have been a bit too much for him physically. And again, there's some style things there that. Then again, it's still Jose Aldo, so who the heck knows? And I would have favored him to beat pretty much any version of Cruz. Not every one of those would have been easy, but I would have favored him. This was supposed to be Aldo and Dominic Cruz in this fight, and I would have favored Aldo. But I could talk forever about my appreciation for Jose Aldo. Seeing him get it was one of the things that I appreciated actually about his previous fight with Merab. He may have lost that fight, but because that was in Salt Lake, and the crowd there treated Jose Aldo like royalty. He got the biggest pop of the night for a walkout. I think Edwards winning the belt that night got a bigger pop as a reaction because he head kicked Kamaru Usman in the 5th round of a fight he was losing. But if we're just talking like who got the biggest pop when they walked out that night, it was Jose Aldo. But seeing him get this in Rio, which clearly means a lot to him. If he does want to continue, I'm not worried about his health. I don't know that I like his chances to become champion in this weight class. Not at 36, 37. Not with his miles. Respectfully, that would be a profoundly historic achievement for him to do so. But I'm not, who do I think he goes out there and just gets, horribly hurt by? I don't think anybody. I think Merab could still beat him over 5 rounds because Merab is a freak. I don't know that I would love his chances against Sean O'Malley. But I don't view any of those as, boy, he's going to go get slaughtered. Even Piotr Jan, when they fought for the belt, through 3.5 rounds, that was a very competitive fight. You could argue Jose Aldo was up 2-1 after the first 3. It was 4 and 5 where things really kind of fell apart for him. And he obviously got stopped in the 5th. But I'm not. He's not one of these guys that at this point in time he goes out there and I'm just cringing worried about his long-term health and just not wanting to see this guy get slaughtered. He's not he's not washed. He's a little, given years and miles, he's not what he used to be, but he just beat the like 10th ranked guy. He beat a ranked opponent here. I forget where Martinez was ranked specifically. It might have been like 12 or 13. But he beat a guy on a 6-fight winning streak at bantamweight. He's beating good guys. Like Jose Aldo's still a competitive fighter at the top end of one of the toughest divisions in the sport. Nothing but respect for that man. So whatever he decides to do next, uh, I mean, it's purely about money at this point, would be my hunch. And if he can make more money getting some celebrity boxing appearances, I say do that. You can get whatever money you can, beat up some people who don't know what they're doing. But it's up to him, and fair enough. About Martinez, I had some questions about, this is one of my big questions about him. What does he have when his kicking game is kind of taken away from him? Aldo took it away from him. If you see, again, especially down the stretch in this fight, towards the tail end of the first round and then 2 and 3, the majority of it is fought in boxing range, not kicking range. That's not where Jonathan Martinez does his best work. He stopped kicking because they weren't working. And which is fine, man. Like, you got to make that call. One of the jokes that got pushed around because Jonathan Martinez kicks incredibly hard. Are we worried about his leg breaking when Aldo starts checking these things? The answer, yes, a little bit. But what he has, if his kicks aren't working, he was actually more willing and a little more fluid and competent in the pocket than he had been in the past. I know some other people are a bit more down on him after this fight. I'm actually, because I'm looking just at his development here for my point, in a handful of his more recent fights, he has been like assiduously avoiding punching exchanges. Now, here you could tell his preference was kicking, but he did not look as gun shy in the pocket here as he has in the past. So I'm sure he and his team are aware of some of these things that he needs to work on. He trains with Mark Montoya, who's a very, very good coach. So if I can see some of these things that, this needs some work, this needs some refinement, I'm sure they're very well aware of it. And I think it's something they have been working on because he looked a little better in those positions here than he has in the past. It's still not his A game, and part of the problem he ran into here is his B game. Like, again, if plan A doesn't work, what's plan B? Turns out he is not nearly as good at plan B. And ideally, plan A doesn't work, you're just as good, more or less, at plan B and C as you are at plan A. And he's not quite there. But I did see some improvement from him from the last couple of fights in sort of similar positions to this, where his kicking game's working better in those fights, but the distance gets collapsed a little bit. He was a lot more like, nope, 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 nope. Circle, back to kicking distance. We're not hanging out here. The experience that he gained here of some pocket fighting, I think will serve him well. So I'm still fairly optimistic about his upside. Some of that is pursuant to him taking appropriate lessons here. But he's got a good team. He's still young. And this is not like losing to a very washed legend who just pulls a rabbit out of it. This is not like Ryan Bader losing to Tito Ortiz. For those of you who remember that incident. This isn't that. He will need to rebound, but I still think his ceiling is pretty high. All right, it's been a while talking about. Well, again, I had stuff to talk about with the main, and I can talk about Jose Aldo for a while. So, The rest of these should be a little bit faster. So next up, Anthony Smith submits Vitor Petrino with a guillotine choke. Um, what was it? 2 minutes of the first round. So they come out. Smith lands a couple of calf kicks. Petrino shoots a bad double leg. They hit the fence. Smith grabs kind of a front headlock. Very clearly, like, guillotine threat here. Petrino ignores the threat, lifts him up, gets him down with a double leg. Smith, like, fine, I'll take the guillotine, and taps him out with it. Couple of things here. Smith had a good read on Petrino in general, especially the mentality, like young, very strong, good upside to Petrino, but young, undefeated guys don't always have the experience to know, maybe not this, maybe not that, maybe we reset here, and they have more self-belief, not just self-belief like I can achieve, but this decision, this plan is the right one, and they can be a bit bullheaded in the face of countermanding evidence until it bites them in the butt. That kind of showed up here. Smith landed like one or two calf kicks that really kind of induced Petrino making bad decisions. He mentioned like, yeah, my kick defense still kind of sucks, so my goal is to just calf kick them before they calf kick me. You know what? Fair enough. I didn't completely write off Anthony Smith here, but I should have given him more credit. Petrino was taking a decent step up. I mean, before this, it was, Modestas Bukauskas and Tyson Pedro, and due respect to those gentlemen, they're not Anthony Smith, even though Anthony Smith is not exactly going to become world champion at this point. So, but Smith, if he wanted to avoid, relegation, he needed the win here. He got the win here. Fair play to him. Michel Pereira, he couldn't help himself. He just couldn't help himself. He defeats Ihor Potieria, or Potieria? Potieria? I don't remember how to pronounce that. My apologies. So, beats Ihor Potieria with a standing guillotine choke, 54 seconds of the first round. He got away with something here a little bit. We'll talk about it. So, he comes out, drops Potieria with a jab fairly quickly. Then as Potieria is on his back, rather than try to pass the guard normally, like a sane person, Michel Pereira does the backflip. And as he's coming down, his knee hits the chest of Potieria, but his shin very clearly hits him in like the neck and the jaw. Technically, this is kicking or kneeing the head of a downed fighter. Now he does this, and he gets into north-south, and Potieria does a very poor ghost escape attempt, and because he does it poorly, gets caught in a standing guillotine, gets tapped out, and then falls over because he tapped right before he went to sleep. They spent a long time trying to decide if they were going to take the win away from Pereira. I'm glad they didn't. Here's the thing about this. One, I'm of the opinion, and I'm on record as being of the opinion, legalize kicks and knees to the head of a downed fighter. Stop this nonsense. That is the superior rule set. Been on record about that for a while. There is, however, and maybe you have to waive this sort of policy for Pereira but there is kind of a chaos policy. It's unofficial, but it goes a little bit something like the more chaotic a situation, they do lean more on the intent of the move rather than what it does. Because, again, there's a lot of chaos in fighting. So when we get to really chaotic scenarios, they if he had been throwing a knee, even a knee to the body, like if his goal here had been I'm going to do a backflip and I'm going to drop my knees onto this guy's body, one would be legal. But if he had been trying to land an offensive move and he had hit him in the head, they probably would have taken that away from him. Now, bear in mind, according to the rules, intent should not matter that much, but because chaos, intent becomes a more important part of the equation. And you can think that's stupid. I think that rule is stupid. Again, just let it happen, man. Kicks and knees to the head of a down fighter do not play as big a role as people are afraid of. There's a bunch of situations that people say, oh, see, if we let that happen, this could have been really bad. And I just have to point out, if everyone knows that you can get kicked or kneed in the head when you're down, that situation doesn't happen to begin with because fighters will know what you can't retroactively apply a different rule set to a different scenario when that scenario might never have arisen under the rule set, provided everyone knows that that's the rule set. You kind of get what I'm saying there? I hope so. They don't take it away from him. They let him have this one. Somebody's gonna have a talk with him though, because again, he got real close to having a a great moment taken away from him. Potieria is not a UFC caliber fighter. Oh, he got 2 wins in the UFC. Yeah, one was over very washed Shogun, and one was where he missed weight. Like, I don't know that he should be here. Michel Pereira, on the other hand, at middleweight continues to be a problem. Get him someone of note, if not ranked, a decent name that is not. We need to see what this guy can legitimately do at this weight class, because thus far, he's looked exceptional. And it's against a lower level of opposition, but he's blown the doors off of people, off of the guys he's been fighting at middleweight. Get him somebody better. So, good win for him. Kyle Bahalio kind of runs over Paul Craig, more or less expected. He had a decent, if you want to understand kind of the thought process here, he was asked, like, you predicted the knockout, and he said, yes, that's not me being disrespectful to Paul Craig, who's a good fighter. That's me looking at his history, doing my homework, and figuring out the best way to beat him. You know what? Fair enough, man. That is not an inaccurate assessment of Paul Craig's career history thus far, for the record. Paul Craig's game is so predicated on trying to get you into his guard. And look, the jiu-jitsu guys, especially the jiu-jitsu guys who talk about how effective it is in, real world kind of self-defense scenarios. One, I don't think that, statistically speaking, that's a fair claim, for the record. There's I shouldn't even say a handful. There's like 3 or 4 things. Not a handful? I don't know. Handful is such a generic term. I'll have to look up if there's a specific range for it. But there's a few things, like 3 or 4, that jiu-jitsu, especially like sport jiu-jitsu, I don't think does a great job of addressing. If you want specific examples of that, if we're just talking about being worried about self-defense, I think I can't say this about most schools, because I don't know most schools. If you don't introduce weapons to your rolling, and you're primarily concerned about self-defense, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because all you need is like 2-3 inches of knife. And suddenly you can be on top, or we can be in a clinch. Watch anytime fighters are clinched and they start throwing those little hammer fists or whatnot, those punches that don't really matter. If you got, again, not even a big knife, you get like a paring knife, right? 2-3 inches. If that's in their hand all of a sudden and they're landing, you got a problem. You got a real problem. So if you don't introduce some weapons to your rolling on at least an intermittent basis, semi-regularly, that's a problem. The big thing that a lot of jiu-jitsu doesn't address is like multiple attackers when strikes are involved. But, most self-defense or self-styled self-defense, look, places don't do that very well anyway. I mean, plus, like, a good jiu-jitsu school will, like, do, especially if you're a higher rank, like, if you're a good brown belt or a black belt, you should be able to roll with, like, 2 to 3 white belts at a time, just as a matter of course. Again, there's no striking involved there, and that complicates things. I think the only other thing, those are the two big things. Any other stuff is a bit ancillary, but those are the two like big things that self-defense for jiu-jitsu. I think if your school doesn't address those, then you're doing sports jiu-jitsu, which is fine. You'll still be able to handle yourself against the vast majority of situations. I think I've said this before. Like if your primary concern is can I handle myself if things go south in the world, if you're a good blue belt, you got 90% of the population covered. Um, Again, if you're a good blue belt. If you're a good purple belt, that goes up even. But like a solid blue belt level of competence in jiu-jitsu is kind of all you need for self-defense in general. You you get too much higher than that, like you don't need to know worm guard and K guard and the, some of the nuances of like De La Hiva and reverse De La Hiva and all the different leg entanglement scenarios. You don't need a great saddle system. Like there's a lot of stuff that you don't need that you become self-referential in jiu-jitsu. If somebody decides he wants to make your life more difficult in a bar, if you're a good blue belt, you've probably got that handled. Assuming his buddies don't jump in and assuming he doesn't have a knife. But again, small thing that a little bit more specialized training will. But if you are a good blue belt, dealing with weapons not all that difficult, assuming you have a little bit of training in the area. And mass attackers are again that's a whole other thing, whole other very complicated thing that most self-defense styled schools tell you they have all the answers for. And if anybody that tells you I can make you a master at fighting 2 or 3 people at once, full of crap. Absolutely full of crap. There's a couple of principles, but fighting 2 people is not twice as hard as fighting 1 person. It's like an order of magnitude greater. Like, not just times 2, like move the decimal point. Then 3, we move the decimal point again. Like, I don't care how good you are, if there's 4 or 5 in particular, like 5's kind of the magic number for people roughly your size. Again, if there's a massive size disparity, it changes a little bit, but 4 to 5 is kind of that magic number when you're kind of screwed, statistically speaking. But my point there, because Paul Craig's ground game is predicated on him getting you into his guard, I get off in that tangent because the jiu-jitsu community will tell you all I have to do is pull guard. If the other guy doesn't know what you're doing or what he's doing, yes. That's why I kind of will work for self-defense. If you got a good guard and you can pull somebody down, you can mitigate a lot. But if everybody knows that's what you're doing, especially in MMA, especially in UFC level MMA, you don't have much, man, because pulling guard is not easy. In fact, it's very difficult. There's a reason that so many horrible injuries happen with guys doing it in jiu-jitsu competitions, because they just throw themselves at the other guy and frequently will just destroy somebody's knee. Worst injuries you will ever see in jiu-jitsu do not come from the application of submission holds. They come from guys with like flying guard or leg scissor takedown. We saw one of those too actually on this card. We'll get to that when we're talking about Rufy. So Paul Craig, just not a lot there if he can't pull guard on you. And Bahalio did not allow him to pull guard and just kind of punched him out on the feet. Get Bahalio, get him I mean, Paul Craig was technically ranked above him, but let's get that man he called out Jared Cannonier, did Kyle Bahalio. Thumbs up on that one. Make that fight. Make that fight. Uh, let's see. Next. Our main card. Yeah, that was our main card. So, not bad. Ran along. The last two fights going the distance. This was a long card. It was like 7 hours start to finish. This was a while. As for the prelims, Joe Anderson Brito defeats Jack Shore via doctor stoppage, 3:35 of the second. So Brito was landing some calf kicks. Then Shore started checking them. Here's the thing about that. If you're dealing with a maniac, they're just going to keep kicking you. I mean that, like, look at the... So what happened here, Brito he was winning this fight anyway. Landing some calf kicks, pushing forward, pretty good clinch game, just was winning the fight anyway, right? To that point. So Shore starts kind of checking the leg kicks, these calf kicks, and Brito just keeps throwing them, full blast. And finally, one of the ones that gets checked badly cuts the shin of Jack Shore. And it's a well-checked kick. Let's be very clear about this. Like, how he checked that is kind of textbook. Turn the knee out, square that up so it's bone on bone. And he checked with like the spot right below the knee, which is where you're supposed to check those, and it just didn't matter. He'd already taken a few that had kind of like swollen up and started bruising that. And the more bruised you are, the easier you are to cut, especially with like blunt force stuff, because everything's tighter, right? The bruising, things start swelling, skin gets tighter, it's more likely to cut or tear. And it started bleeding pretty badly right away. They paused the action, got the doctor to look at it. Doctor waved it off. Shore wasn't very happy. I can understand him not being happy. This was a somewhat gnarly cut, not the worst shin cut I've ever seen. The doctor was apparently worried about the leg being broken, which I believe, according to Shore at the moment, is no, there's no break. This was a pretty bad cut, though. Like, I don't love this stoppage, but I can understand where the doctor's coming from. It's just where I'm going to leave that one. And this was not going Shore's way anyway. He was not... Like, it's not like he was really starting to move downhill and then Brito got saved by a lucky kind of strike. No, like, Brito was winning that fight. Yasmin Lucindo defeated Karolina Kowalkiewicz via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. Lucindo just better hands, better wrestling, just kind of better everywhere. Muktabek Orlbay defeats Elvis Brenner via unanimous decision, 29-27 across the boards. Orlbay got, I'm going to say lucky, not in the decision, but hear me out here. So Orlbay comes out very well, very strong, beats up Elvis Brenner the entire first round. Has him mounted near the end. If you're being super generous, you could have gone 10-8. Again, super generous, I didn't, but it was enough one-way traffic there for me to at least say, like, that's not unfair. Second round, Orlbay still wins it, but end of the round, he's really committed to a takedown, and Brenner's able to reverse it and get on top and end the round in top position doing some pretty good work. Again, not enough to take back the round, but enough to get some confidence back for Brenner and enough to shift the tide a little bit. See, here's the thing about Elvis Brenner. Not to dust off this old chestnut, but that man has that dog in him. He has been in some absolute wars, 3-round wars. His fight with Guram Kutateladze. That guy will never quit on himself, ever. And he will keep pressing the action. Third round, he starts doing work. It's not huge, but he's starting to win the round. Orlbay grabs the fence at one point, and the ref immediately deducts a point from him. Now things are going again, maybe not his way. He's able to eventually like scramble out of some bad positions, get back on the feet, and he is, when I say he's saved, he is saved from a draw because he won the other 2 rounds. But if Brenner had won this round with the point deduction, we would have got a draw. With about 5 seconds left, give or take, Orlby drops Brenner with a punch. Enough to win the round. Enough to go 9-9 and not have a draw. But when I say he got lucky, if that punch misses, if he doesn't get that knockdown, he loses that round 10-8, and we get a draw. Orlby had some really good punches connect in the first round, and just his default seems to be, if I've got you hurt, I'm going to start wrestling. Little bit of decision-making problems there. Like, if you've got a guy hurt, I'm not saying that striking with Elvis Brenner is always the best idea. He hits pretty darn hard. But, again, kind of gauging time and place on that, some of that just looked a little green. Like a lack of faith in his hands and an overcommitment to a specific path to victory nearly cost him here. Also at lightweight, Drakkar Klose defeated Joaquim Silva via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the boards. First 2 rounds to Klose. He fades a bit in the third. Silva wins the third round. Can't win the fight, though. Kind of as expected, man. Joaquim Silva, what could have been for that guy? If he was able to stay healthy and active, he could have had a legitimate run. Because he's still pretty darn good. Not quite good enough to beat Klose. After the fact, Klose said he wants to fight Jalen Turner or rematch Beneil Dariush. I'd actually be okay with either of those. Those are both reasonable. On the early prelims, Mauricio Rufy defeats Jamie Malarkey via TKO 442nd of the first round. Ran him over. There's a lot about his striking posture, his guard, his stance that is very reminiscent of Conor McGregor. Dean Thomas picked up on that as well, and obviously he knows more than I do. But the first little bit that I saw the way Rufy was moving and whatnot, like, yeah, Conor's been kind of your tape study guy, hasn't he? Like, you watched him, and that's not a bad thing. Like, find someone who does stuff that you like to do and you are good at better than you. Do your tape study on them. Tape study is very important, especially for younger fighters. Not just like watch this fight or watch some of these. Like find somebody to emulate and then to build off of. I mean, kind of by way of example, boxers do this all the time. Like James Toney, when he was young and starting out, he watched Ezzard Charles. He watched a lot of Ezzard Charles because Ezzard Charles was a very defensive, a very defensively sophisticated fighter. And Tony got a lot of his defensive slickness learning from what Ezzard Charles had done before. And I just bring that to say, I think Rufy's done some tape study on building on and emulating aspects of Conor McGregor. Again, he hit the leg scissor sweep takedown, which is a rarity, but I forgot to mention. Back up just a sec with me to Klose and Silva. So third round, Silva actually goes for a guillotine. And Klose tries to slam his way out of it, not forward. They're against the fence. Silva jumps guard. Klose wraps his arms around the waist and throws himself backwards. If you've seen professional wrestlers do like a Northern Lights suplex, think that kind of setup, but since the other guy's legs are around your waist in guard, you're just flinging their head at the mat as hard as you can. Another way to think about that, if you ever seen like botched belly-to-belly suplexes in professional wrestling, kind of like that. Didn't work. He was able to get out of the choke anyway. throws himself down. So he's basically throwing himself into being mounted. But it did force Silva to reposition, try to go up for the one. It's still tight, and he still had to fight his way out of it. But a lot of people kind of went like, "What are you doing there?" I could see what he was doing, and it didn't work as intended. But like Josh Barnett got on Twitter and said, "Look, just because a technique didn't work the way it was intended to, does not make it does not make it bad or a wrong decision." And he talked about how, Billy Robinson showed him how to get out of a guillotine in this same way. Because if you throw yourself backwards like that and you throw their head at the ground, your head's actually protected because their arm's around it. Like if they don't let go of that choke to brace, their head and their face are going into the ground. In fact, they did here. It wasn't enough to fully break the hold, but Silva did kind of, hit his head on the mat. And for the record, because I know there's some people who wouldn't that be spiking? No. The biggest component of ruling something as spiking is removing the ability of the other guy to defend themselves. Like the big thing they didn't want is pile drivers. Like pro wrestling pile drivers, which believe it or not, yes, you can do legitimately. You can absolutely get someone around the waist, lift them up, use your legs to stop their arms from coming into play, and spike their head on the ground. That's what they didn't want. If you're holding, this kind of got brought up when I've seen guys slam themselves out of rear naked chokes going forward. I forget, was it was it Ben Saunders I saw do that? I want to say it was Ben Saunders, but don't quote me. Somebody's got his, or he might have been the one applying the choke when it happened to him. I forget, but fight I saw. Guy's got a rear naked choke pretty much locked in the backpack position. Guy was being choked. Okay, we're now break glass in case of emergency, right? So he kind of like reaches up, grabs the shoulders, and slams forward. And he plants the other guy's head into the mat, and it basically knocks him out. It's not a high percentage escape. But if you're at that point, again, we're doing whatever we can. Like, this is my last thing before I have to tap or go unconscious. Here's my Hail Mary. Sometimes they work. Similar kind of thing here. Again, it's not spiking because the other guy, the guy with that choke in, he sees the ground coming at him. He can break that choke to block the slam or to block his head going down hard. If you choose not to, that's on you. What they don't want is they just don't want you, like, again, inflicting neck trauma when the other guy can't do anything about it. You can choose not to do something about it. That's not the same as being unable to do something about it. So, for the record, would have been legal, and it's certainly a choice. Again, that's not the ideal way to get out of a guillotine choke, but if your other options are kind of being taken away, and a lot of them were, like, again, Silva had jumped guard, standing guard, but he jumped guard. The fence is to Silva's back. Like, he can't really get slammed going backwards. The guard's in place, so he can't really angle. He's got to do something, because that's a tight guillotine. So, something to just be aware of. That slam, it did get him out of this choke, believe it or not. It didn't work. Again, you didn't get the knockout, but coming down like that was able to move the hips just enough to start doing a little bit of that. Forced Silva to release, to try and switch from regular guillotine to one-armed guillotine, because you kind of have to do that when you're mounted. If you like the mounted guillotine, one of the ways to do it, I'm not going to, is instead of getting your grip on your own wrist, you just let your arm be there. Your right arm, let's say you're choking with your left, because Silva was in this case, so I'm visualizing. Your non-choking arm goes out to the mat to post. Then you push off of that. You leverage your hips in, and like Luke Rockhold did this to Michael Bisping in their first fight. You can find them. Like the one-arm guillotine is slightly preferable. It's slightly safer when you're in the mount, because you're less likely to get rolled and bucked off because you've got like 3 points of pressure on the ground theoretically, knee, and then non-choking hand. But it was enough for him to get out. So in fairness, like the technique did achieve the ultimate goal of not being choked out. Anyway, back to Rufy. Looked really good here. Good shot selection, good distance control. Very McGregor-esque in terms of the fighting style he presents. And I mean that as a compliment. So, good debut for him. Dione? I think it was Dione Barbosa defeated Ernesta Caracete. Am I saying that right? Hang on. Caracete. I had it. I used to. Because I made note of how Anik pronounced this. Because the C is pronounced like an S. Carrascate. That's it. Carrascate. Okay, I got there. Haha, yay me. Pretty good fight here, actually. Barbosa wins the first 2 rounds, fades down the stretch, and Carrascate just very persistent. Pretty good cardio. Apparently was like was a member of the Lithuanian national swim team, so I assume the cardio's good. Um, yeah, again, fairly conventional stuff, but what was looking like a one-sided fight started turning towards the end of the second and then in the third, and I can appreciate that. Lightweight Ishmael Bonfim defeated Vince Pashalvi in an decision, 30-27 across the boards. Bonfim not only lost his last fight when he got beat by Benoit Saint-Denis, had a little bit of a layoff. Not as long as Pashel. Pashel was out for like 2 years, but Bonfim was out for like 10 months, I think. He was out for a while. Much more controlled performance out of him than before. More patient, more deliberate with his shot selection. Much needed rebound win for him. And kicking everything off, Alessandro Costa defeated Kevin Borjas via TKO, leg kick and punches. 135 of the second. Some nasty calf kicks from Costa that finally broke Borjas down. He dropped him with leg kicks like twice before he finally got on top and was able to pound things out. Fine enough fight. Yeah, that was the event. So, I mentioned already, no fight of the night. Did Pantoja and Urseg a little dirty. That would have been my fight of the night. Performances went to Michel Pereira, Caio Bajalio, Mauricio, I call him Marcio, Mauricio Rufy, and Alessandro Costa. Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Again, I would have given fight of the night to Pantoja and Urseg. I very much liked that fight, but as far as like the post-fight bonuses, not giving Smith one feels a little weird, but of the other stoppages, I mean, you weren't going to give one to Brito for the doctor stoppage, right? Because they don't usually do that. If you're just going to give if you look at the other 5 and say we can only do this for 4 of them, who's the low man on the totem pole? Yeah, it's kind of Anthony Smith. Would it be between like Smith and Costa? It would have been, yeah, I think that it's kind of between Smith and Costa, and all things considered, I think Costa had a better overall performance. So, if you want my full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Oh, last thing about UFC 301 was announced that former UFC light heavyweight champion and the 2005 Strikeforce 2005 Pride Grand Prix winner Mauricio Shogun Hua will be going into the UFC Hall of Fame in the Pioneer Wing. Shogun was in attendance for this. Absolutely deserved. He's already in there for like his first fight with Dan Henderson is in the fight wing, which, bear in mind, also well deserved. He's got a couple of other fights you could put in that fight wing, for the record. Yeah, Shogun's the man. If you did not see his run through Pride, that's arguably the best version of him. Go look it up, man. He was something else. He was absolutely something else. He was a vicious fighter, dynamic, powerful, Dude blew through Quentin Rampage Jackson in like the very, very quickly. How quick was their first fight, actually? I'm gonna look this up because yeah, less than 5 minutes. Bear in mind the first round in Pride is 10 minutes, so there was plenty of more time for him to have gotten something. But like in 447 of the first, I mean, um, yeah, he just I forgot. I occasionally forget that he stomped out Cyril Diabate. Hit a nasty knee bar on Kevin Randleman, knocked out, he beat Alistair Overeem a couple of times, stopped him both times they fought. Jeez. Comes to the UFC a little bit like post knee injuries, has to rework his game a little bit, becomes champion. Might have actually had a decent run if his first title defense hadn't been against John Jones. Then, again, has a couple of legendary fights after that. Um, just can't say anything bad about Shogun. Uh, 1,000,000% deserved. Nothing but respect for that guy. So good on him. Yeah, that's it for that, I think. So, as I mentioned, full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Go give it a read if you're so inclined. Always appreciate that. All right, we are moving on. That took a little longer than I thought it would. To UFC on ESPN 56. I already mentioned it, but we are in St. Louis, Missouri. And if this had a good main event, it would be a perfectly fine fight night. It really would. It really would. Unfortunately, well, what we have here is not the best main event in the world. We have Derek Lewis and Rodrigo Nascimento. I don't know what to say about this. Um, Derek Lewis is almost he recently turned 39, excuse me. He is 1-4 in his last 5. His fight with Jailton Almeida from last year is one of the worst fights you'll ever see. If we want to go further back, actually, he is 2-5 in his last 7. And Rodrigo Nascimento he lost early in his UFC career to Chris Daukaus. Couple of split decisions, coming off a win over Don'Tale Mayes. The UFC is desperately, desperately, desperately hoping that Derek Lewis does the old flying knee thing in the first 30 seconds and gets out of here. Because there's no way this fight's a good idea for 5 rounds. This fight's gonna go long. I can feel it in my bones. This fight is just, it's not gonna be what they want. They want a quick knockout. It's not gonna be that. We're gonna be here for 25 minutes, and the last 20 are gonna be these two sucking wind, and it's just gonna suck. And I hate everything. I hate everything sometimes. Oh, I can feel it. I want this to end quickly. I don't care who wins. I don't care. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I don't think a long fight has ever favored Derek Lewis. He's got some late stoppages because he doesn't have good cardio, but he's good about managing his cardio. He'll just kind of, okay, hang out, and while the other guy gets more tired, he will then land the Hail Mary kind of thing. But longer fights don't favor him in any sort of meaningful way. Certainly not at this point in his career. I'm going with Nascimento's actually a minor underdog. I'm going with Nascimento. That fight's gonna suck. Welterweight, a good fight. Joaquin Buckley and Nursultan Rozboyev. Um, this fight came together kind of last minute. Joaquin Buckley is from St. Louis, so he really wanted to be here. He's looked good at middleweight. Wins over Andre Fialho, Alex Morono, and Vicente Luque. Two of those stoppages, and he's looked pretty darn good. Welterweight seems to suit him. He's fighting a guy who's also pretty darn good. Ruzboyev has not lost since December of 2019. Only 2 wins in the UFC. Granted, Bruno Ferreira and Cedricus Dumas. Buckley's a step up in competition for him, for sure. Which weight class are we at? Hang on, okay, is Ruzboyev dropping? I swear his last couple of fights have been at middleweight. I might be misremembering. Hang on. His win over Ferreira. Why do you not just tell me Yeah, that was middleweight. Okay, then was Dumas down at welterweight? No, that was middleweight too. So Ruzboyev dropping to welterweight. That potentially complicates things. Odds are with Buckley just a little bit. Hmm. Buckley's looked real good. Not knowing how good Ruzboyev is at welterweight is kind of what's monkeying with my pick here. Ruzboyev is very good. If this were middleweight, I would pick Ruzboyev. I think welterweight's going to make me lean towards Buckley, and I feel very not confident in that. Buckley's good. I don't mean to say he's not, but Ruzboyev is the kind of guy that has given him some problems in the past. I don't know how good I feel about that one. Light heavyweight, Alonzo Menafield and Carlos Ulberg. Sorry. Ulberg. Menafield on a decent, lost to William Knight a while back. Hadn't lost since then. Askar Mozarov, Misha Serkinov, draw with Jimmy Crute. They rematched. He choked him out. Beat Dustin. He was losing to Dustin Jacoby before his power kind of saved him enough to win a couple of rounds. Jacoby was taking him apart. Ulberg's actually found his footing recently. I mean, he lost his UFC debut to Kennedy Nzechukwu. Hadn't lost since. The last 4 have been finishes. I kind of want to lean Ulberg here. Yeah, I do. How big a... Ooh. You're getting like plus 200 on Menafield? I don't know that I favor Ulberg. I don't mind favoring Ulberg here. Again, I do. But 2-1 on my money on Menafield. That would be tempting. Next up, lightweight. Carlos Diego Ferreira and Mateusz Rembeszki. Interesting. Good fight. Ferreira broke a 3-fight losing streak by knocking out Michael Johnson his last time out. was just about a year ago. Before that, losses to Beneil Dariush, Gregor Gillespie, Mateusz Gamrot. That was a rough stretch for him. Ferreira's pretty good. Rembeshki, I need to double check. What, 2-0, 3-0 in the UFC? 3-0. Wins over Nick Fiore, Loic Radzhabov, Roosevelt Roberts. Overall, he's got a good winning streak. 16 wins. Step up for him here against Ferreira. Pretty decent step up, too. How old is Ferreira? That's going to play a role here. 39 at a lightweight. Respect to the man for still going out there and fighting. Contrast, Rembeshki is 31. That's an important 8 years. 31 to 39, that's an important distinction. I think I'm going with Rembeshki. Yes, I am. Let me look at the odds. I don't like him that much, geez. So he's like 3-1 in some places. Favorite is Rembeshki. Again, I'm picking him, but that seems like you're asking for trouble. Featherweight, good fight here, actually, pretty good. Alex Caceres and Sean Woodson. Caceres having a little bit of a resurgence going on, coming off a loss to Giga Chikadze. Man, respect to Caceres. He's 35. He's been with the UFC for a good chunk of time, actually. I mean, well, yeah, 2011. Sheesh, he's been around. Yeah, March, so he's over 13 years. That is nothing to sneeze at. And there was a time he was maybe the worst guy on the UFC roster, for the record. That hasn't been true for a while, but there was a time when he was just not good. Credit to him. He turned it around. He's on a good run overall at the moment. Very good recent record, actually. Again, coming off a loss, but his only losses recently, coming off the Chikadze one, he lost to Sadiq Youssef in March of 22. And that's it. He had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, 7-2 in your last 9 is, once again, man, that is respectable, even commendable. I don't know that I like his chances against Sean Woodson. Woodson's only got one career loss. Happened in his second UFC fight, excuse me. I don't know how they got to a split in his fight with Charles Jourdain. That felt really like it should have been him outright. I like Woodson here. I'm not trying to dismiss or completely sleep on Caceres, but he has struggled especially if he's not like the longer guy, and Sean Woodson is taller and longer, and that has historically not gone all that well for Alex Caceres. Okay, that's the main. No, not quite the main card. There's another heavyweight fight on the main card. Why? That should be a war crime. Waldo Cortez Acosta and Robelis de Spain. I said before, this is an interesting matchmaking. Cortez Acosta is a guy they've seemed moderately high on. And de Spain is, for a heavyweight, he's kind of a both athletic guy and kind of a weird guy. Cortez Acosta has pretty fast hands, but he tends to just wing the overhand right. He's been moderately susceptible to calf kicks. And he's dealing with a guy who's very tall and very long. Oh, it's a tough one. It's a fairly close one. Let me. Despain winning would be funnier. Yes. So let's go with him. And because these are low-level heavyweights, I don't feel bad about picking what I think will be funnier. All right. Oh, that's the main card. On the prelims, Chase Hooper and Vyacheslav Borshev. Good old Slava Claus. This is not a bad fight. Um, Here's the thing about it, though. Hooper has come a fair way since he debuted in the UFC. The move up to lightweight, I think, was good for him. On a two-fight winning streak, he's still hittable and he still has durability issues. And that's a bad problem to have against Borshev. If Hooper can get things down, he's the better grappler. But Borshev's takedown defense has been clearly a point of focus for him. Borshev's last couple, I think he's won his last couple, right? Last one. 2-2-1 in the UFC, coming off a draw with Nazim Sadikov, which I think was fair. Beat Mahashate before that. Yeah, his UFC losses are to Mark Jacasey and Mike Davis, and Jacasey just wrestled him. And so did Davis. Why was that a draw against Sadikov? Was that just what? I think there was just a 10-8 in the first middle round. Middle round was a 10-8. I remember that. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Borshev here. Borshchv. I'm not convinced that Hooper's striking defense or his durability is really up to snuff here. And the last two guys he's fought at this weight class have not exactly been built to test that uh, very stringently. And Borshev will. Also at lightweight, Terrence McKinney and Esteban Ribovic. This feels like McKinney. I don't think I need to go into too much detail here for all you guys, right? Odds are with Ribovic. Hang on. I want to make sure. I might be confusing him with somebody else. Hang on. He is 12-1. 1-1 in the UFC. Lost his debut to Loic Radzhabov. Beat Kamuela Kirk his last time out. Why are we souring on Terrence McKinney here, odds makers? I know he's had a couple of rough fights. But he's won his last two. And I don't know that Ribovic is, no, I can tell you why we're souring on McKinney. If he doesn't get things done in the first round, things tend to go south for him in a hurry. Okay. I don't know. This still feels a little bit like McKinney to me. I don't need to pick with the odds. I am my own man. I'll go with McKinney. Might feel very, very foolish about that, but strawweight Tabitha Ricci and Tisha Pennington, formerly Tisha Torres. How long has Tisha been out? She's 34. Last fight was April of 22. Lost a split decision to Mackenzie Dern. She gave birth between now and then. This is all about whether or not Ricci can get takedowns. She's coming off a split decision loss to Lupi Godinez. You could have scored that for her. The layoff's a bit concerning for Tisha. Then again, Tisha's also always had problems being smaller, and here I don't think she's all that much smaller because Tabitha Ricci's not exactly a large strawweight. I think it's still probably Ricci. The layoff is just a big deal. Again, like 2 years or so. Like that's a chunk of time. Let's see. Welterweight, we have Billy Goff and Trey Waters. Um, Goff, I think, has fought in the UFC before. He's 9-2. Yeah, won his UFC debut over Yusaku Kinoshita. I vaguely recall that. Mr. Waters, 8-1. Also won his UFC debut. He beat Josh Quinlan. I'm probably just going to go with the odds on this one because I am not confident enough. I don't have strong recollections of either of their UFC debuts, so odds are with Waters. Okay. Yeah, just okay on that one. Charles Johnson, old Inner G against Jake Hadley. Odds are with Hadley on this one. Let's take a look at him. He's 10-2. Why are the odds here? He's 2-2 in the UFC. He's lost to Cody Durden. I'm just gonna have to ask again, like, why are we souring on Charles Johnson? He's 14-6. He's only 33. I know he's 3-4 in the UFC, but one, he actually gave Makayev a pretty tough fight. Two, he probably should have won the Ode Osborne fight. He might have had Rafael Estevam too, if he'd fought a little differently in that third round. I'm actually going with Johnson here. A little bit more underdog heavy picks for me this time around. Not sure how I feel about that. Kevin Jousset and Jared Gooden up next. This is welterweight. Gooden, 1-1 in the U.S. 1-1 in this time around in the UFC. His original trip to the UFC from 2020 to 2021, he went 1-3. Dude, your UFC debuts against Alan Jouban. That's rough. Then you fight Abubakar Nurmagomedov and lose. You beat Nicholas Stolze, but then you miss weight and lose to Randy Brown. He missed weight. He came in on short notice to get back, but you still missed weight and then lost to Carlston Harris. Finally got a win. He beat Wellington Turman. I seem to recall Jousset. Does he prefer Jousset? It should be Jousset because he's French, but occasionally they've asked that, that be pronounced differently. He's 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Kiefer Crosby and Song Kanan. Overall 5-fight winning streak. Sorry, 3-0 in the UFC. He also, no, sorry, my mistake, misread. I've been moderately impressed with him. I feel like that he's the pick here. Because Gooden has not been especially impressive. So I'm going with Jousset. Let's see. Next up, J.J. Aldrich and Veronica Hardy. That is our... Okay, that's it. Wait, why does this list... Oh, sorry, that's same fight listed twice over there. Okay, that's what... Fix that. You don't need to... I know some of you are confused about Tisha Torres or Tisha Pennington, but that's the same... Tabitha Ricci can't fight on the same card twice. Come on, people, fix that. Anyway, kicking everything off, J.J. Aldrich and Veronica Hardy. Aldrich is a pretty solid overall, but relatively unspectacular fighter. 2-2 in the last four, coming off 2 wins. Leong Na Leong and Montana De La Rosa. Veronica Hardy seems to have really found herself recently. 3-1 in her last four, only losing to Bea Malecki. Wins over Poliana Viana, Juliana Miller, and Jamie Lynn Horth. Again, Aldrich is pretty solid, but I kind of like Hardy here. Not by a lot, but I'm gonna lean Hardy. I'm gonna lean Hardy. And that is it. All right. Again, full coverage will be Saturday in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com. Stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. All right. Only bit of news I have here, and I'll check Twitter, of course, but Matt Brown, longtime UFC veteran, all all violence Hall of Fame guy. Um, Most accurate description of a style ever when he described himself as a technical brawler. He announced his retirement. He's like 40 and change, coming off a win. Um, Says he's done. Says he's going to focus on, coaching and teaching. Still practicing the martial arts, but going to be done for a little bit with the competition side of it. Leaving active competition. Matt Brown is responsible for a couple of my favorite knockouts. His elbow of Diego Sanchez is immortal, as is Matt Brown's nickname. He's always been a student of the game. Never the most athletically gifted guy, but hard-nosed, intelligent, thoughtful, both in the cage and out of it, and thoughtful application of violence is the best way I can describe watching a Matt Brown fight, win, lose, or draw. He's been in some exceptional fights. He can turn in some great knockouts. If the UFC had bothered with the gimmickry of the BMF belt back when Matt Brown was really in his heyday, he would have been in those fights. I watched his season of The Ultimate Fighter because Amir Sadallah won that season and that weight class overall. That was one of the last ones I watched. I don't remember exactly which season that was. I don't remember because I remember kind of when I stopped watching The Ultimate Fighter week to week, and I want to say it was after Matt Brown's season. Let me double check that actually, because I wish to be sure I am not just whistling Dixie. If there wasn't something else from that season that I kind of... No, I watched that one. That was that was season 7. That was Rampage and Forrest Griffin. Yeah, I watched that one. Okay. Yeah, so I watched his entire UFC career and all the silliness that accompanied his journey there. Because, yeah, man, that was in 2008, his UFC debut. 2008, he beats Matt Arroyo at the Ultimate Fighter 7 finale. Drops a split decision to Dong Yun Kim, beats Ryan Thomas, beats Pete Sell, beats James Wilk, loses to Ricardo Almeida, that was a pretty good fight with Chris Lytle for as long as it lasted. Loses to Brian Foster, beats John Howard. That's actually a pretty good little fight. Loses to Seth Baczynski, finally finds his feet, beats Chris Cope, Stephen Thompson, Luis Ramos, Mike Swick, Jordan Mean. Was it Mean he stopped with elbows to the body? He elbowed him in the kidney or something a bunch of times against the fence. I want to say that was that fight. But don't quote me. Mike Pyle, Eric Silva, loses to Robbie Lawler, but a darn good fight. Loses to Johnny Hendricks, gets out wrestled, beats Tim Means. Loses to Damian Maia, who didn't at that time. Loses to Jake Ellenberger. That was a bad loss. Has a pretty good fight with Donald Cerrone, but loses most of it and gets head kicked. Then he knocks Diego Sanchez out with an elbow. Knocks out Ben Saunders. Loses to Miguel Baeza. Loses a good fight with Carlos Condit. Knocks the crap out of Diego Lima. That split decision with Brian Barberina from March of 22, which was a very good fight. Yeah, that guy, he's like second all time for finishes in the welterweight division. He got close enough to fighting. Like his fight with Robbie Lawler, I think, was a title eliminator. But But a lot of respect for Matt Brown. A lot of respect for Matt Brown. Every student of his is going to benefit from being his student. He is not only a thoughtful guy, he's very good at articulating his thoughts and his observations. There are some exceptional fighters who have the best reads in the world but can't convey that information to others. Matt Brown can. So, good on him. Congratulations on the career, man. You had a good one. You had a really good one. And my thanks to you for all the memories and all the violence. All right. That's all I've got. Let me check Twitter. We hit the 2-hour mark. Good grief. And see if anything crazy has happened. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Nope. Nothing new there. So, plugs. Double shot of me podcasting this week. Monday. So, statistically speaking, whenever you are listening to this, because most of my listens come Monday after I release. Monday, Damn You Hollywood, we will be reviewing The Fall Guy. That's myself and Mark Radulich, and I think it's just us, actually. Last week it was just Mark and me, and we reviewed... crap, what was it? Why am I blanking on this? Oh, it's embarrassing. Talked about it. And I remember being decently... Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Tells you how much of an impression it left. So we'll be doing Fall Guy this week. Wednesday, I will be part of the TV party tonight for the FX miniseries Shogun. That will be Alexis hosts that. That's Alexis Haina. It's going to be her, me, and I believe David Wright are currently set for that one. So tune in for that if you're so inclined. Don't know if I should be listed for some. Sorry, I'm looking at the calendar now, and okay, that one doesn't matter. Huh. Never mind. I'll sort that out. I'm pretty sure that one's slightly mislabeled. Okay. Yeah, that's it for me on the podcasting front, but be aware of that if you're so interested in my takes on movies and television and other things of that nature, and I appreciate you listening to that over on the W2M network. Okay. My regular spate of coverage this week: WWE SmackDown on Friday, UFC event on Saturday. We will be back here next. I record Sunday evening / Monday morning, depending on the day. Next week we will review UFC on ESPN 56, and we will preview UFC on ESPN Plus 99. Headlined by Edson Barboza and Lerone Murphy. That's not a bad fight, actually. What else do we got here? Oh, Chaos Williams and Carlston Harris. Adrian Yanez. He needs to right the ship in a pretty big way. I think he will, though. Give me something else to look forward to here. Nope. We're back to warehouse fights. No, I don't care. No, I don't really care about Temba Garumbo. I really don't care about Abus Magomedov. Yeah, no, that is I don't hate at all Barboza and Murphy. That's a pretty good fight. The rest of that card is, again, I'm curious to see if Yanez can right the ship. But that's it. That is literally it. The only thing I care about. Only thing I care about there. Nothing else. Nothing else even close. Good grief. That is a profoundly uninspired card. That is phoned in. We'll preview it because that's what we do here, and I might phone in my preview because that would be appropriate. All right, that's it for me this week, folks. Thank you all very, very much for listening. I appreciate you. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.